Hi, my name's Leo, and you probably know by now who I am and what I do if you're watching this video, but this video is a little bit different from normal. This is going to be a Q&A, question and answer video. I asked for questions a few days ago on social media. I got lots of very good ones, so I'm going to try and answer some of the ones that seem most interesting to me. There's going to be some questions about the boat, some questions about the voyage and the future plans, some questions about the rebuild, and of course some questions are going to be more technical and some are going to be more personal and everything in between. As you can see, we're still in the boatyard in Panama, and someone did ask actually what the conditions are like for working in Panama, and I can tell you that right now I am getting eaten by mosquitoes and little flying things, no-see-ums. So I think we'll take our first proper question inside the boat. Okay, the first question we're going to answer is from Andy Piddock, who asks, does she sail as well as expected? And broadly speaking, the answer is yes, and I would say even better than I had hoped. I tried not to have too high an expectation, and to be honest, I'm still getting to know the boat and figuring out different quirks and how to get the most out of the boat. And of course, you know, every boat has its strengths and weaknesses. There's no boat that is perfect in all conditions and situations. And Tally-Ho, you know, she's a heavy boat, she's a traditional boat, she doesn't point upwind as well as modern boats, and that's one area where she's not sailing quite as well as I had hoped. Actually, I'm not able to point quite as high as I would like. I hope and I think I can probably get that better with some tweaking in the rig. That's something I'm going to be working on probably on the next windward passage. If I ever have to make a lot of progress to windward, I'll hopefully figure that out of necessity. And of course she's a very heavy boat, so she's not the quickest to accelerate, but actually that weight is a real advantage at times as well. It makes her very stable and kind of gentle and slow moving at sea in rough weather, and also in really light wind, surprisingly, it can be an advantage. And actually we won a short race up in Victoria, basically just by virtue of being so heavy. And being probably lucky and being in the right places, the right gusts. But when you get areas where there's no wind at all, the lighter boats would just stop dead in the water, but Tally-Ho's momentum would carry her through the lulls, and as long as you just kept the tiniest bit of wind in the sail, the weight would keep her moving. As a follow-up question, someone asks, is she tender? Now, a tender boat is one that heels over or tips over more easily because the center of gravity is higher. And I was a little bit worried about Tally-Ho being too tender because of the way we'd rebuilt the frames, the materials we'd used and so on, meant there was a little bit extra weight in the frames. And that was one of the reasons we put a little bit of extra weight in the ballast keel at the bottom to lower the center of gravity a bit and made sure to use lightweight materials for the rig. And I think that must have helped because Tally-Ho is not particularly tender. She's actually quite stiff, which is the opposite of tender when a boat takes more effort to tip over. And being too stiff is not necessarily a good thing either. It makes the boat uncomfortable at sea. It gives a more kind of jerky, violent movement. So there's a sort of sweet spot in between. I don't think Tally-Ho is too stiff, but it definitely takes quite significant conditions to heel her really far over, which I think is good for the boat and the rig, and it's better that way around in a way because it's easier to make a boat more tender. I could take some ballast out of the bilge. It would be easy to add weight aloft or even take weight off the keel if I wanted to. Whereas doing it the other way, adding more weight to the keel or taking more weight out of the rig can be a challenge. Okay, next question is from Brian Bairden, who asks, how do I store and maintain my tools in a salty environment? And that's a really good question because it's a real problem on boats. Unless you're on a much bigger boat with a sort of controlled environment inside, the air is going to be salty. You know, it just is. And wet things come in here, salty things come in here. You can't always wash things with fresh water. There's just salt around, and so things get salty, things corrode. That's why there's so much bronze on the boat, because it doesn't rust in the same way. But of course, tools are usually made of some form of mild steel, and particularly good quality woodworking tools are often kind of a high carbon steel, I think, that rust particularly easily. I don't have a particularly high-tech or smart solution for this. I just try and stay on top of it. So in terms of maintaining my tools, I just try and be really consistent about cleaning them every time I use them. Now this block plane I used yesterday, and although it looks okay at the moment, just the salt from the air in my skin, if I leave this, it will start developing rust, and if I leave it in a drawer for a few weeks, next time I bring it out, it'll be really rusty. So every time I use it, I keep a few things up here in the forepeak: WD-40, some 3-in-1 oil, fluid film, and a little bit of Scotch-Brite and a rag. And so it's pretty quick every time I use it. I just use the WD-40 as a lubricant, basically. A little spray, a little wipe with the Scotch-Brite if needed. This one, just because I left it a day already, it already started developing a little bit of rust. Anywhere with really bare steel like that, a little wipe, and then I just, before I put it away, I just get a bit of oil on a rag and just wipe it, so there's just a little bit of this multi-purpose oil on the bare surfaces. And then I put it away, and I keep my block planes wrapped up in another rag, which is also a little bit oily, inside this drawer. So I just wrap this one up with my other block plane, put that in here, and that should be good next time I use it. I'm going to do the same with this. Again, the WD-40 is not really using it as an oil, just more as a lubricant, rather than water, because then it's not going to leave water on it when I'm finished. Wipe with a bit of oil, done. So it's pretty quick, but it is an extra step, and if you don't stay on top of it, you can quickly find that all your tools turn into a rusty mess pile. And so I do sometimes go through drawers and lockers. Every now and then I'll sort of go through a drawer and just like hit everything. Do this with sort of all my tools in one particular drawer. So that's it really. Probably a better way to do this would be to keep everything in airtight containers, maybe with silica gel packets or something inside to absorb moisture, but I don't think they absorb salt. Really the best thing you can do is just use a light coating of oil on everything when you're storing it. And but it's constant. It's a constant battle. You know, it's not only tools. It's camera equipment, and I mean everything. Everything just degrades in the salt. The saltwater environment with the sun, the UV as well. It's really hostile for materials. So it's a constant battle to try and keep everything from degrading. Somebody else asked about what power tools I carry with me and what I've been able to just borrow in the boatyard. And generally I find that in a boatyard you can usually borrow whatever you need, but when you're on passage or cruising in a more remote area, it's really important to decide which tools you want to prioritize. Obviously you can't carry everything with you. So I do carry quite a few power tools, mostly battery powered. So in here, this is my drill bag. So I got 3 drills, powerful one, a medium one, and an impact driver. And then in this bag, I've got my die grinder, my battery powered router, and battery powered angle grinder, which is really, really useful. And then down here under these shelves, under these drawers in the shelves, I've got a few other tools. I've got a jigsaw, battery powered jigsaw in here, a plug-in heat gun, and then you probably saw I had a power plane in the previous video. That I actually purchased that here. I didn't carry a power plane with me before because I can do most planing with a hand plane, a block plane, but because I was planing lead, I wanted this, and I will keep this on board. I'm sure it will be useful. Like I said, I have a jigsaw. I don't currently have a circular saw on board. I might get one, but I do have plenty of hand saws, so I can make straight cuts. It's just I can't make them that quickly, and it's pretty rare you need to make long straight cuts. What else have I got? Obviously I've got lots of hand tools here, but I think that's mostly it in terms of power tools. Oh, and of course my trusty Hoover or vacuum cleaner. It's also battery powered, and this battery powered work lamp, really useful. And I got about 8 or 10 of these batteries and a charger, of course. But that's mostly it in the way of power tools. I did have a battery powered chainsaw on board for a while, which was really good for firewood, but coming down south, I decided I wouldn't need it. Okay, the next question is a good one. Somebody asked what happened to my finger, because I chopped the end of this finger off several years ago near the beginning of this project, and for some reason I never told anyone what actually happened. I did talk about the accident, but I didn't say exactly how it happened. I can't even really remember why now. I think I just didn't want it to be sort of discussed in minute detail, but I guess I don't care so much anymore because I'm happy to talk about it, and it was never really a secret whenever I was talking to people. I just didn't put it in the video. I cut it on a bandsaw, and I was being stupid and cutting a piece of round PVC piping, and should have known better, but I had part of my finger inside the pipe as I was going in, and I was about to move it out the way, but the pipe span, which can happen easily on a bandsaw if you're cutting something round, or any type of saw really, and it just pulled my finger into the blade. And yeah, so that's what happened. Nothing crazy or controversial really. I did finally, I picked up the end of my finger, the piece, and had a bit of bone in it, and we took it to the hospital, but they didn't want to sew it back on. But I don't even think about it anymore. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I don't think about it, I don't notice it, and I have sort of perfectly normal feeling and usability, so that's good. And I guess it taught me a good lesson. I'm generally a bit more careful with bench tools now. Okay, Peter on Patreon asked about my views on the success of the articulated rudder, by which I think he means the trim tab on the back of the main rudder here. It's great, works really well. It's great that I can use a small, affordable autopilot tiller pilot to move the main rudder around, and it really does steer the boat very well. And it saves me having a complex, heavy, expensive hydraulic or mechanical system. You'd really have to have a huge unit to have enough force to move the actual tiller itself. So yeah, the only problem is that the autopilot unit that I have, and of course I do have a spare, you have to actually get up on the stern of the boat to adjust it, or to take it off and get back manual control, which isn't ideal. Really, I'd like a unit with a control head somewhere else that I can control or turn it off. In fact, I have actually been using or messing around with a pelagic autopilot, which is a different brand, and it actually does have a control unit in the companionway. I've got it all installed, but for some reason the software on that particular autopilot doesn't work as well with the trim tab, and it ends up steering me in a really almost erratically wobbly course. So I'm actually working with those guys to try and adjust the software so that it can react at a different speed and work better with the trim tab. And if I can get that working, I'd prefer to use that, because then I'll be able to control it from the companionway rather than having to kind of get right up to the back of the boat, which in heavy weather can feel a little dodgy. Now, a few people have asked, what is my plan after leaving this boatyard, which should be happening fairly soon? And the short answer is there is not really a big plan. Of course, our goal is to get to the UK to race in the Fastnet race next year, but between now and then things are pretty open, which is a big change in approach to how I was sailing before going through the Panama Canal. On the west coast of North America, we did have a plan, we had deadlines, but I'm trying to cruise in a different way now. I'm trying to enjoy the journey more, slow it down a little bit, and also, you know, people say that the most dangerous thing on a boat is a calendar, and that's a saying that I quite agree with. When you're trying to make deadlines, you end up taking risks that you wouldn't normally do, and you don't end up having time to prepare properly. So there's no huge rush. From here, there's actually a lot of pretty interesting options. Right now, I'm considering a few things. I'm thinking probably of trying to go north for the hurricane season, which is starting pretty soon, so I'll have to get a move on if I do that. And that'll mean going north out of the Caribbean, and either to the sort of northeast coast of North America. That might be New England, Maine, Nova Scotia, that sort of area. Or maybe go to Bermuda, stay there for a while, maybe even cross the Atlantic this year. It still could be possible, although it's probably pretty unlikely. In that case though, if I go to the States or Canada, I could overwinter up there, or come back down to the Caribbean for another winter season down here, which is probably more likely, and then cross over to the UK next summer, a bit earlier in the summer probably. The other option, if I don't go north now, or if I start going north and have a horrible time and change my mind and come back south again, is to spend the summer in this area. Panama and Colombia are out of the hurricane zone, so they are a relatively safe place to spend the summer months. There is quite a lot of lightning, quite a lot of rain as well in this particular area. So if I did that, I would probably try to wind up in ABC Islands. There's supposed to be slightly better weather there during the summer. There's a bit more wind, which makes it feel a bit cooler, and not so much lightning and so on. So those are a few of the options. I'm not committing to any of them yet. And if I go north from here, I probably won't know actually where my destination is until partway through the trip. Now, a few people have asked what I would change about the boat, or features or designs that don't quite work that well. And there are a few things. One thing that's been really a problem in tropics is the lack of awning while sailing. It would be really nice to have some kind of sun cover. I mean, some people did ask about weather protection from wind and waves and rain, and that would be nice as well, I'm sure. But so far I haven't missed that actually. So far I've just missed shade. And of course, when I'm anchored or in a boatyard, I can put this awning up, which is great. But when you're sailing on this boat, you can't really have an awning because the boom is so low. So that's one of the biggest things about the overall design. Or if I was building a new boat, I would try and make it so that it can have an awning while sailing if possible. Other changes I would make, I would consider making the bowsprit longer. It's already pretty long, but the boat does have a little bit of weather helm on some points of sail. Pretty standard for a boat like this, but with a bit more sail area further forward, I think that might help balance it better. Another issue is the main sheet winches, and I could probably solve this issue potentially by getting a smaller diameter line for the main sheet, but at the moment the self-tailors I think are not big enough for this line, and whatever the cause is, the effect is that I can't really winch the main sheet in when the sail is very powered up. So I can pull it in by hand pretty well in most situations, but when we're really powered up and say I need to bring a lot of sheet in to bring the boom all the way into jibe, it's really difficult for me to get this in on my own. If you have two people, it's easy. Someone can sweat, someone can tail. But on my own, it's really hard, and that's probably the most difficult part about sailing this boat on your own. So I am going to try, either changing the winches, or probably more likely I'll start by downsizing the actual sheet itself and see if that helps. Until then, if the sail's really powered up and I'm really struggling, I would probably just have to tack and go all the way around instead of jibing, but it's not ideal. Okay, Mike's got a good question here. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. Going aground twice since she launched, what charts are you using and how are they updated? How do you assess risk regarding entering and cruising in areas with inadequate charts? Very good question, and I can't tell if there's a little dig in there or not, but it's fine if there is. First off, I want to talk about risk and risk assessment, but first off I want to say that I can't shift the blame for going aground onto the charts. Any prudent mariner knows that charts can be inaccurate and knows that you have to take into account lots of other things when navigating. And if I was being more careful, those instances of going aground could have been avoided. But I want to talk about risk management and risk avoidance, and bear in mind that this might all just be me trying to make a big excuse for going aground. But hear me out for a minute. Risk avoidance is one thing, right? It's avoiding risk, full stop. Risk management is a different thing. And when you're managing a risk, there's really two things to take into account. There's the likelihood of the risk and the severity of the risk. Okay, so some things are very likely, but it's not that bad if they happen. Other things are very unlikely, getting hit by lightning, say, but if it happens, it can be really bad. And obviously, if the risk and the severity, the likelihood and the severity is very high, that's a situation you really want to avoid. Now, when I hit a reef in the San Blas Islands recently, that was a high likelihood, low severity situation because of the particular situation I was in, and I'll explain why. I was blasting along full sail up in a protected area next to an anchorage, and having an amazing time, and I knew there were reefs in the area, and I also knew I didn't quite have the right charts up. The reefs were shown on some charts but not on others, and not on the ones I had in the cockpit, but I had my hands full and I thought I knew where they were. Obviously I was wrong. So I knew that the likelihood of going around was fairly high, but I also knew that the severity of going around in that particular situation was pretty low, and so I chose to take that risk. And that's about, your personal comfort level in terms of taking risk. Now, the reason the severity was pretty low was a few things. First off, it was sheltered flat water. So if there had been a swell running and you go aground, that becomes very dangerous because the boat can get smashed on the reef. It was a rising tide, so that makes it easier to get off if you go aground. I'm very confident with the strength of this boat, the way it's built and the shape of the keel. It really doesn't bother me to go aground in most situations. It's very unlikely to do any serious damage to this boat. And I know that whatever happens, I can fix it. I also know that if I have to fix it, it'll probably be quite fun and it'll probably make quite good content. The other factor that I was taking into account is that this is my boat, so if I was to go aground, I don't have to answer to anyone else. I wouldn't have been sailing somebody else's boat like that. So there's less severity in the sort of social and financial consequences as well. Additionally, there were a lot of people in the area, there were anchored boats and so on. So, in the worst case scenario, which is really unimaginable in that situation, but if the boat had got really damaged, there was no risk to life. There's plenty of people around. So I was actually totally comfortable taking that risk, and when we went aground, although initially I was a little panicked, a little flustered, I got the boat off and it wasn't really a big deal. I knew we were hauling out soon anyway, and I would deal with the damage then. I think another reason why I'm pretty comfortable going aground is that I learned to sail in the Bristol Channel, where there's 45 feet of tide on a big spring tide, and basically all boats there go aground twice a day, certainly the boats on moorings and so on. And I've been aground so many times on so many boats in so many different situations, often intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but always in situations where the severity of the risk was relatively low. Never have I been aground where there's a swell running or where I'm in a really remote area, that kind of thing, because when you're in those situations, you know the severity of the risk is higher and you take more precautions. Now, of course, everyone has different levels of comfort with a risk, and I think I have a relatively high risk tolerance in some ways. I think other people might call it stupidity. It's another word for a risk tolerance in my case. But my point is, find your risk comfort level, and don't be afraid to take risks within that comfort level if you understand the severity and the likelihood. And I would go as far to say as, if you're not going around a couple of times a year, you're probably not sailing the boat hard enough. Now, someone else asked what sort of visa I had in the US. Now, this might be a bit of a technical, boring question to some people, but I know some people are interested. I started out on a B1, B2 visa, which is a standard business and tourism visa, which I got from visiting the States on Addix, the schooner that I was working on before I had this boat. And that visa gives you 6 months at a time in the States. But every 6 months I'd have to leave, which got quite tiring, and there was some grey area about how long you had to leave the country for, so it was a little bit scary. So I hired an immigration lawyer, and she was great and helped me get an O1 visa. And that is a visa that's normally for sports people or artists or other people that don't fit into the sort of normal categories. The name of the visa is quite funny. The name of the visa is Alien of Extraordinary Ability, which I found hilarious. But it's not a bad title. I'd take that, though I don't necessarily identify with it. But anyway, that visa allowed me to work in the States, but then after I left, I didn't bother renewing it. So that has now expired, and I've recently renewed my B1, B2. So I now can enter the States 6 months at a time again on a vessel. Someone else asked about numbers, top speeds and so on, and Tally-Ho's hull speed, I think, is about 8.5 knots, and that's what I've sort of observed. When the boat's really powered up, going as fast as you can, we make about 8.5 knots on average. Of course, you can sometimes see bigger speeds than that. That's usually when you're surfing down a wave or something and overtaking your bow wave a little bit, and I have seen 10, 11 knots on the GPS. but that's not really a true boat speed if you're going down a wave. It's not really possible for a displacement boat like this to go faster than its hull speed. That's a sort of physical constraint to do with the length of the bow wave and the difficulty in overtaking your bow wave, I guess. And so the only way to do that is to plane, and so planing boats, they can overtake their bow wave and go faster than their hull speed. But obviously Tally-Ho is not a planing boat, and I haven't got around to adding the hydrofoils yet. A few people have asked questions about whether I prefer sailing or boat building, and I have to say I think I love them both equally. But for me, it's about the contrast as well. After doing one of those things, I really appreciate doing the other one for a bit. So normally after a couple of years of sailing, I like to go back to boat building and vice versa. So the Tally-Ho rebuild was longer than I would normally want to spend doing boat building without any sort of really serious, significant sailing. And I think after that, I'm probably going to spend more than a year or two sailing, hopefully. But I'm sure eventually I will be going back to boat building for a bit, or at the very least some sort of hands-on, construction-y, creative work. There's also been a few questions about the transition from boat building to sailing, from being in such a big project with so many people to being out on a boat, traveling, always moving around, and now on my own a lot more. And yeah, it's an interesting transition. It's challenging in some ways, but it's been a very good transition, and I was really ready for it. After so long boat building and so long in one place, I was really eager to get moving. And although I put down some roots in Port Townsend and I made a lot of lifelong friends in that area, and Squim, of course, I always knew I was going to be leaving, and so I wasn't putting down the sort of roots that you might put down somewhere where you're planning to live for the rest of your life, for example. So that sort of prevented me, I think, from getting too sort of attached to the place. I was always looking forward to leaving. So I was really ready to leave. And actually, you know, I'm actually quite an introvert in many ways, and solitude is something that's really important to me. And so is community, and I really appreciate and I need community, but I need sort of long periods of solitude as well. And during the project in Squim and Port Townsend, I didn't often get as much sort of solitude and alone time as I needed, or as I would have liked. And that was fine, but now I feel like I'm sort of still making up for that. And so being out here on my own, I see people wondering if I'm lonely and if I'm okay. And I mean, this is the dream for me. Just after a project like that, getting long periods of solitude alone on the boat is really, really important to me, and really enjoyable and healing and all sorts of things. So you don't have to worry about me getting lonely. There's a lot of community out here, if and when I want it. Lots of people to meet on other boats, on land, ashore, and lots of opportunities to have my friends and family come out and sail with me if I want them to. But for me, it's really important as well to spend time alone. And like I said, I'm kind of making up for not doing that very much for quite a few years. Having said that, I'm also really looking forward to a time and a place where I'm ready and want to start building community a bit more. That is really, really important to me, and you know, at some point I will be wanting to put some more roots down and build a bit more of a community, even though I'll probably need to go off on my own for long periods at a time. So that might be something I start working towards after I get back to the UK, or maybe not. It may end up happening somewhere else in the world later on, who knows. Somebody asked about the Tally-Ho violin, the fiddle that was made for me very kindly with Tally-Ho's offcuts, and if it's still on the boat, and it is, here it is. And I do play it occasionally. I'll be honest, I haven't practiced nearly as much as I would have liked to. I find it quite rare to that I actually just find the time to do it. I mean, there's so many things I'm trying to do at the moment. Maintaining the boat, making the videos, all that stuff, of course, work stuff, but also trying to learn Spanish, trying to keep fit and healthy, trying to go on runs, trying to sail the dinghy, trying to have fun, trying to socialize, trying to play music, and a million other things. But I do have the fiddle. I really enjoy playing it, and I'm really keen on learning. I'm just not very good yet. and probably can't play on camera yet because I think it would just be too painful. But yeah, I have a fiddle. I also have a guitar on board. I also have a full DJ setup and PA system on board because I like throwing parties sometimes. And yeah, I love this fiddle. It's a beautiful thing. Now, there's been a lot of questions from a lot of different people wondering if the level of maintenance that I've been doing on this boat is normal, and thinking that it seems to be very soon that I'm having to repaint and pull the boat out of the water and do all this work, which is really quite surprising to me. But of course it makes sense if you don't know boats, if you haven't spent a lot of time on boats. It does seem like a lot of work, I guess, but it's totally normal. I mean, granted, there's a couple of things about this boat in particular which have meant there's been a little bit more than normal, I suppose. The fact that it was a kind of almost completely new build in some respects, and completely custom. So, most boats aren't as complex and aren't as custom. And so if they're coming off the kind of production line, then all the issues of sort of design issues and systems issues are sort of pretty sorted, you would think. And if they're a custom boat but older, then after some time all those issues get fixed and ironed out, but there's still a lot of maintenance. On this boat we're still figuring out, ironing out all the issues that didn't get sorted during the build. And a lot of the times, a lot of the jobs I'm doing are actually just things that we didn't get around to during the build because I was so eager to get moving. But a lot of the stuff I'm doing is just really regular boat maintenance. I mean, it's really normal for boats to spend half the season out of the water. I mean, we're only spending a month out of the water every year. A lot of boats spend half the year out of the water, and they'll get paint, they'll get this and that and other jobs. For wooden boats, it's pretty normal to paint the top sides every 2 years if you want to keep the boat looking good. Painting the anti-foul is typically done every year. Some boats get away with not doing it for 2 years or even longer, but if you want to really protect the boat, especially in the tropics, if it's a wooden boat, 1 year is totally standard. There's other things like greasing the propeller, which should be done every year. So, if you look around the boats here, I mean, it also depends on what sort of condition you want to keep your boat in, right? And I'm quite particular. Want to keep the boat in good condition. I feel like I have a duty to keep the boat in good condition, and so I put the time in to do that. A lot of boats aren't necessarily kept in that condition. That's totally fine as well, and that takes less time and less work, of course. But any of the actual active boats here, the boats that are cruising, that are moving around, if you go into the marina, talk to people, every boat owner, every skipper is always doing projects. They've got several projects on the go all the time, I guarantee it. Even the new boats, even the boats that have just come off the production line, it's amazing. Without fail, there's issues that are being dealt with all the time. And it's a well-known phrase that, sailboat cruising, which is what people call this, I guess, is just fixing your boat in exotic places. So yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone. It's certainly not sort of pleasure cruise. Owning a boat, particularly a wooden boat, is more work than leisure, for sure. But with a wooden boat, at least, I love that work. I think it's really satisfying, really rewarding work. And because I got a wooden boat, I don't mind doing a little bit more work, and it being woodwork, which I enjoy, compared to having a fiberglass boat and that work involving grinding fiberglass and getting covered in dusty epoxy and sticky stuff. And I mean, there's boats here, people cruising, doing the same thing as me with fiberglass boats that have found they've got osmosis, and they're spending weeks and weeks grinding out all the osmosis pockets and patching them up and so on. So, I mean, really, it doesn't matter what type of boat you've got. There's always issues. Putting anything in the ocean and the strong tropical sunlight for long periods of time and living on it and, doing all the things we do in a house but on a boat, it's inevitable that it degrades and it needs maintenance, several months a year of real work. In fact, I would say I'm actually really pleased with how few issues have come up with this boat, considering it was completely custom, considering all the systems, considering all the design that went into it, all the things that I was just figuring out as I went along, things I'd never done before, all the volunteers who are involved, as well as very, very skilled professionals. I think it's actually pretty amazing that there's not been bigger issues. I think it's amazing that this capstan is working so well, you know, and I've only had to fix and modify it four or 5 times. Really, I'm really glad. I'm really grateful and impressed that we're able to be fully cruising, you know, halfway around the world, only, you know, 2 years after launching a completely custom, complete rebuild. Alright, so I guess that's it for this episode. I know it was pretty different from normal. I always get a little bit nervous about doing these sort of talking heavy videos because I figure they're just going to be boring, but there might be some interesting things in there. You know, you might get to know me a little better in a little different way when I'm talking about slightly more abstract things, I guess. So anyway, please let me know if you enjoyed it. The feedback you guys give and the comments are really important to me. And if it seems like people enjoyed this, I might be able to do a few more. They don't take quite as much time to make as my normal videos, so I might be able to fit some in between. And if you don't like it, you can let me know too. But either way, thanks for watching, and a massive, massive thank you to everyone who has donated or supported this project. It does make a huge difference. It means that I'm able to make these videos, maintain this boat, sail this boat, live on this boat, and I'm very, very grateful, and I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Cheers.